She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just whispered the sentence that would change 3 lives forever. I need a husband by tomorrow, or they take my son. The rain outside Rosie's diner blurred the city lights of Los Angeles into streaks of neon sorrow as Jenna Parker collapsed into a vinyl booth, her waitress apron still tied around her waist. Her brown hair, pulled back in a messy ponytail, clung to her tear-stained face. 12 hours. That's all the court had given her. 12 hours to prove she wasn't a failure as a mother. She didn't know she was being heard. 2 tables away, Daniel Rivera sat frozen, his fork hovering mid-air, as his 7-year-old daughter, Sophia, colored quietly beside him. The dark-haired single father hadn't planned on getting involved. He hadn't planned on believing in miracles again. Not after losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago. Not after rebuilding his entire life from the ground up as an immigrant trying to make it in a city that chewed people up and spit them out. But when a mother breaks in public, something ancient stirs. The overhead lights of the diner cast harsh shadows across Jenna's face as she clutched her phone, the voice on the other end cold and clinical. Family services, emergency motion, foster care. The words were bullets, each one finding its mark in her chest. Her 4-year-old son, Miles, was staying with her elderly neighbor tonight. He didn't know. He couldn't know. How do you tell a child that the system designed to protect him might tear him away from the only parent he's ever known? Daniel watched her shoulders shake, watched her press her palm against her mouth to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. He thought of Sophia, imagined someone trying to take her away, and felt his resolve crack down the middle. What happens when desperation collides with compassion? What happens when a lie, meant to save a child, begins to feel dangerously real? This is the story of an impossible decision made in 12 hours. Of a waitress who had nothing left to lose and a widower who remembered what it felt like to drown. Of 2 children who would become the glue holding together a family built on a legal fiction that somehow felt more honest than anything either adult had experienced in years. It's about the judge who would have to decide what family really means. It's about the ex-husband who would try to destroy them. And it's about discovering that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we never saw coming. Stay with this story, because what started as a desperate arrangement in a late-night diner would become a courtroom battle, a found family, and a decision that would redefine love itself. Trust me, the judge never saw it coming. Los Angeles never slept, but that night, it felt like it was holding its breath. Jenna Parker had been on her feet for 11 hours straight when the phone call came. The dinner rush at Rosie's diner on Sunset Boulevard had been brutal. Tourists from Canada wanting pictures with their burgers, a bachelor party from Melbourne stumbling in at midnight, and Mrs. Kim from Koreatown who always left exactly $3 no matter the bill. Her feet ached. Her lower back screamed. The coffee stain on her uniform had been there since Tuesday. But she smiled through it all because Miles needed new shoes, because the electricity bill was due, because surviving in this city meant pretending you weren't drowning until the exact moment you went under. The diner was nearly empty now, just after 2 in the morning. Jenna wiped down the counter with practiced efficiency, her mind already calculating tomorrow's tips, next week's rent, the impossible math of single motherhood in the most expensive city in America. Her ex-husband, Trevor, had left when Miles was 6 months old. Not for another woman. That would have been easier to explain. He'd left because fatherhood wasn't the vibe he needed for his creative energy. He was a photographer now, apparently doing quite well in Santa Monica, dating someone who looked good on Instagram and didn't come with the baggage of a screaming infant. He paid child support when he remembered, which was almost never. Jenna's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, expecting her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, confirming Miles was asleep. Instead, she saw two words that made her blood turn to ice. Unknown number. Her hands shook as she answered. "Miss Parker." The woman's voice was professional, detached, the kind of tone that delivered life-altering news before asking if you had any questions. "This is Rebecca Lawson from Los Angeles County Family Services. I'm calling regarding case number 2847 JMP. The rag dropped from Jenna's hand. "There's been an emergency motion filed this afternoon," the woman continued. "Your ex-husband has petitioned the court for full custody citing unsafe living conditions and parental instability." "What?" Jenna's voice cracked. "That's insane. Miles is fine. We're fine. Ms. Parker, according to the filing, you've been evicted from 3 apartments in 2 years. You work overnight shifts, leaving your minor child with elderly neighbors. You have no family support system, no stable partner, and—" "I work to feed my son." Jenna's voice rose. The cook, Louise, glanced up from the kitchen. "Trevor hasn't paid child support in 8 months. I'm doing everything." "I understand this is difficult," Rebecca cut her off gently but firmly. "But Judge Morrison has reviewed the case. Given your employment instability and the lack of a 2-parent household, he's approved an emergency evaluation. If you cannot demonstrate a stable marital household and permanent residence by noon tomorrow, Miles will be placed in temporary foster care, pending a full hearing." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. "Noon?" Jenna whispered. "Tomorrow? That's 12 hours. The court prioritizes child welfare, Miss Parker. I'm sorry." The line went dead. Jenna stood there in the empty diner, the neon lights outside flickering pink and blue through the rain-streaked windows. Somewhere in the kitchen, a radio played old Motown. A car alarm went off down the street. The city carried on like it hadn't just ended her world. She slid into the nearest booth, the vinyl squeaking beneath her. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. 12 hours. No husband. No house. No chance. Trevor had done this. She knew it. He didn't want Miles. He wanted to win. To prove she was the failure, not him. To rewrite history so he came out looking like the concerned father instead of the deadbeat who'd abandoned them. "I just need a husband by tomorrow," she whispered to the empty diner, her voice breaking. "That's all. Please, just a husband. Just someone to stand there and look stable. Please." She didn't pray anymore, hadn't in years. But in that moment, staring at her reflection in the dark window, Jenna Parker begged whatever force might be listening for a miracle she didn't deserve and couldn't imagine. She didn't notice the man 2 tables away. But Daniel Rivera noticed her, and he remembered exactly what drowning felt like. Daniel Rivera hadn't meant to eavesdrop. He'd brought Sophia to Rosie's diner because she couldn't sleep, and neither could he. The nightmares had started again, his daughter waking up crying for her mother, asking questions Daniel didn't have good answers for. "Where is Mama? When is she coming back? Did I do something wrong?" "No, mija," he'd whisper, holding her small body against his chest in their Pasadena house. "You didn't do anything wrong. Mama got sick. She loved you so much." But how do you explain cancer to a 7-year-old? How do you make peace with a universe that takes a 34-year-old woman and leaves her husband to raise their daughter alone in a country that still didn't quite feel like home? Daniel had immigrated from Mexico at 19, worked construction while studying engineering at Cal State LA, and met his wife, Isabella, at a community center in Highland Park. She'd been a teacher, brilliant and kind, with a laugh that could light up the darkest days. They'd built a life together, bought a house, had Sophia, planned for a future that felt secure. Then came the diagnosis: stage 4 breast cancer, 18 months from detection to funeral. That was 3 years ago. Now Daniel was a civil engineer for the city, designing water systems and drainage plans, making decent money but working long hours. Sophia went to a good school, had friends, spoke English better than he did. They were surviving, barely. But survival wasn't living, and Daniel knew it. Tonight, Sophia had wanted waffles. Daniel had needed to get out of the house where every corner still held memories of Isabella. So they'd driven to Rosie's Diner, a place Isabella had loved, where the coffee was strong and the pie was never stale. Sophia was coloring a picture of a butterfly when the woman in the booth started crying. Daniel tried not to listen. In Los Angeles, you learned to create privacy in public spaces, to give people their breakdowns without witnessing them. But the diner was nearly empty, and when she answered her phone, her voice carried. Family services, emergency motion, foster care. Daniel's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He watched her crumble, watched her slide into the booth and whisper that desperate prayer. I just need a husband by tomorrow. Sophia looked up from her coloring. Daddy, why is that lady sad? She's having a hard day, mija. Like when Mama died? Daniel's throat tightened. Maybe. I don't know. He should have stayed out of it. He had his own problems, his own grief, his own daughter to worry about. Getting involved in a stranger's crisis was the kind of thing that complicated lives that were already too complicated. But Daniel remembered the night Isabella died, when Sophia was 4 and woke up asking for her mother. He remembered the social worker who'd come to verify that he was capable of single parenthood, who'd looked at his house and his job and his sadness and decided, barely, that he was fit to keep his own daughter. He remembered how close he'd come to losing everything. Daniel looked at the woman in the booth, brown hair falling out of its ponytail, uniform stained with coffee and ketchup, eyes red from crying. She looked about his age, late 30s maybe, and she looked exactly like someone who'd been fighting alone for too long. Foster care. Those 2 words echoed in his head. Sophia tugged his sleeve. Can we help her, Daddy? I don't know, mija. Mama said we should help people who are sad. Daniel's heart cracked. Isabella had said that. She'd believed in showing up for strangers, in community, in the radical act of caring when the world told you to look away. He thought about his house in Pasadena. 3 bedrooms, stable income, a widower with a child. Exactly the kind of family structure courts love to see. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably illegal. But Daniel stood up anyway. Stay here, mija, he said quietly. I'll be right back. He crossed the diner, his heart pounding. The woman didn't look up until he was standing right next to her booth. When she finally raised her head, her eyes were devastated, hollow, like she'd already lost everything and was just waiting for the paperwork to confirm it. I couldn't help overhearing, Daniel said gently, his slight accent making the words softer. I'm Daniel, and I think I can help. She stared at him like he'd spoken another language. I'm not asking for money, he continued quickly. And I know this sounds crazy, but I own a home in Pasadena. I'm a widower. I have a daughter. If the court needs to see stability, a 2-parent household, then maybe we can give them that. Silence stretched between them. Then she laughed, a broken, hysterical sound that was more sob than humor. You don't even know my last name." Daniel glanced back at Sophia, who was watching with wide, curious eyes. "I know what it's like to be one bad day away from losing everything," he said quietly. "I know what it's like when the system decides you're not enough. And I know—" His voice caught. "I know what it feels like when someone needs a miracle and nobody shows up." Jenna looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in 12 hours, she felt something other than terror. She felt hope. The drive to Pasadena felt surreal. Jenna sat in the passenger seat of Daniel's sensible Honda Accord, watching the rain streak across the windows as they left Sunset Boulevard behind. Sophia was asleep in the back, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Neither adult spoke. What was there to say? "Hi, stranger. Thanks for agreeing to commit fraud so I can keep my son." They'd exchanged basic information in the diner parking lot. Voices hushed, words careful. Daniel had given her his address, his phone number, his LinkedIn profile to prove he wasn't a serial killer. Jenna had shown him pictures of Miles, her custody papers, her work schedule. "We'll figure out the details," Daniel had said. "But first, you need to get Miles. Bring him to my house. We'll meet with the social worker together tomorrow." "Why are you doing this?" Jenna had asked. "You don't know me." Daniel had looked at his sleeping daughter through the car window. "Because nobody helped us when we needed it. And because I think Isabella would have done the same thing." Isabella, his late wife. The ghost in this equation. Now, at 4 a.m, they pulled up to a modest craftsman house on a tree-lined street in North Pasadena. The neighborhood was the kind Jenna had only seen in movies. Well-kept lawns, American flags on porches, the kind of stability that felt like a foreign country. Daniel carried Sophia inside while Jenna called Mrs. Chen, her neighbor, asking her to bring Miles over. The elderly woman, bless her, didn't ask questions, just showed up 30 minutes later with a sleepy 4-year-old in Spider-Man pajamas. "Mama?" Miles rubbed his eyes as Jenna scooped him up. "Where are we?" "We're at a friend's house, baby. We're going to stay here for a little bit, okay?" "Okay." Miles yawned and buried his face in her neck, already drifting back to sleep. Mrs. Chen gave Jenna a long, knowing look. "You be careful, sweetheart." "I will. Thank you. For everything." Inside, Daniel had set up the guest room. Clean sheets, a nightlight, stuffed animals arranged on the bed. "For Miles," he said quietly. "Sophia's room is down the hall. You can take the other guest room." The house was warm, lived in. Family photos lined the hallway. Daniel and a beautiful dark-haired woman on their wedding day. Sophia as a baby, the 3 of them at Disneyland. The woman's presence was everywhere. In the Mexican folk art on the walls, the prayer candles on the mantel, the cookbook in the kitchen with notes in Spanish scrawled in the margins. Jenna felt like an intruder in a museum of someone else's happiness. She put Miles to bed, tucking him in carefully. He was out within seconds, exhausted from being woken in the middle of the night. Jenna stood there watching him breathe, her heart fracturing. What if this didn't work? What if they saw through the lie? What if she lost him anyway? "He's beautiful," Daniel said from the doorway, his voice soft. "He's everything," Jenna whispered. They stood there in silence, 2 strangers united by desperation and parenthood, watching a child sleep. Finally, Daniel spoke. "We should talk. About tomorrow. About what we're going to say." They sat at the kitchen table, coffee brewing, even though neither of them needed more caffeine. Daniel pulled out a notepad. "The social worker will want to see that we're married," he began. "We'll need a story. How we met. How long we've been together." "How long does it take to seem legitimate?" Jenna asked. 6 months? A year? A year, Jenna decided. We met at the farmer's market in Old Town Pasadena, Daniel suggested. It's public, crowded, believable. You were working a booth, selling pies for the diner, Jenna added. You came by with Sophia. We started talking. You asked me out. We took it slow because of the kids, Daniel continued. Wanted to make sure it was serious before introducing them. We got married quietly, Jenna said. Small ceremony, just us and the kids. City Hall downtown. They were building a fiction, but it felt almost real in the quiet kitchen. Their voices low, their exhaustion making everything feel dreamlike. Boundaries, Daniel said suddenly. We need to be clear. This is temporary, just until you get stable custody. Then you can move out. We'll get a quiet divorce, and you never have to see me again, Jenna finished. I know, I'm not trying to trap you. I didn't think you were. Daniel rubbed his face. This is complicated, and I don't want anyone to get hurt. Too late for that, Jenna said with a sad smile. But I appreciate what you're doing. I'll never be able to repay you. Before Daniel could respond, a small voice came from the hallway. Daddy? Sophia stood there in her unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes. I had a bad dream. Daniel was up instantly, scooping his daughter into his arms. It's okay, mija. I'm here. Who's that? Sophia pointed at Jenna. Jenna's breath caught Daniel, met her eyes over his daughter's head. The moment of truth, hours earlier than planned. This is Jenna, he said carefully, and her son, Miles. They're going to be staying with us for a while, is that okay? Sophia studied Jenna with the brutal honesty of children. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? Jenna opened her mouth, but no words came. Daniel saved her. We're friends, Sophia. Good friends who are helping each other. Why don't you go back to bed, and tomorrow you can meet Miles. He's 4, like you were. Okay. Sophia yawned. Can I show him my toys? Absolutely. After Daniel put Sophia back to bed, he returned to find Jenna crying quietly at the table. Hey, he said gently. What's wrong? She asked if I was your girlfriend, Jenna whispered. And I realized. I'm going to lie to your daughter. I'm going to lie to my son. I'm going to lie to everyone. And what if they figure it out? What if this ruins your life? Daniel sat down across from her. My wife died 3 years ago. I've been barely holding it together since. Trust me, my life is already complicated. But you know what? Maybe this is exactly what we both need. Fraud and deception. Family, Daniel corrected. Even if it's fake, even if it's just for a little while. Maybe we both need to remember what that feels like. Jenna looked at this stranger who'd offered her everything. Okay, she whispered. Let's do this. Outside, the rain had stopped. Dawn was breaking over Pasadena, painting the sky gold and pink. And in a house full of strangers, 2 broken families began the process of pretending to be whole. By 10 in the morning, they had 2 hours until the social worker arrived. Sophia and Miles had woken up and bonded instantly over breakfast, the way only small children can. Miles showed Sophia his toy cars. Sophia taught Miles how to make a proper paper airplane. They colored together at the dining room table, oblivious to the adults' panic. Daniel and Jenna sat on the back patio, running through their story again. How long have we been married? Daniel asked. 3 months, dated for a year before that. Where did we get married? City Hall in downtown LA. August 15th, just us and the kids. Wore simple clothes, No big ceremony. Why not? Because we're both practical. We wanted to invest in the kids' future, not an expensive wedding. What's my favorite food? Jenna paused. They hadn't covered this. Tamales? She guessed. Your mother's recipe? Daniel smiled sadly. Good guess. It's actually mole. My grandmother taught Isabella how to make it, but the social worker won't ask that. What will she ask? Everything. Daniel's expression darkened. She'll ask about our relationship, our finances, our living situation. She'll look for inconsistencies. She'll watch how we interact with each other and the kids. So we need to seem in love, Daniel finished. Yeah, or at least comfortable with each other. They were neither. They were two terrified people playing house with the highest possible stakes. Jenna looked at the backyard, well maintained, with a swing set Sophia clearly loved, a vegetable garden that was probably Isabella's project, wind chimes that sang in the breeze. This was a real home, a real life, and she was about to contaminate it with her desperation. Tell me about Isabella, she said quietly. Daniel's face shifted. Why? Because if I'm living in her house, sleeping in her guest room, lying to people using the life she built, I should know who she was. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then, she was a second-grade teacher, loved kids who weren't hers almost as much as Sophia. She made the world's best chilaquiles. She cried at commercials. She believed in God and community and showing up for people. His voice broke. She would have liked you. She would have done exactly what I'm doing. I'm sorry, Jenna whispered. For your loss. For imposing on it. You're not imposing. You're surviving. There's a difference. They heard the kids laughing inside. The sound was pure, uncomplicated joy, something both adults had forgotten existed. Miles doesn't laugh like that anymore, Jenna said softly. Not since Trevor left. He's been so quiet, so worried. Like he knows I'm drowning and he's trying not to make waves. Kids shouldn't have to parent their parents, Daniel said. No, they shouldn't. Jenna wiped her eyes. But they do, don't they? When we're broken, they become the glue. Sophia used to wake up screaming, Daniel admitted. Every night for 6 months after Isabella died. She'd ask me if I was going to die too, if she'd have to go live with strangers. I slept on her floor for a year because she was terrified of being alone. Is she better now? Some days. Other days I find her talking to the picture of her mom on the mantel, asking questions I can't answer. He looked at Jenna. That's why I said yes last night. Because I know exactly what it feels like to be helpless, to watch your kid hurt and not be able to fix it. They sat in silence, two parents united by trauma and fear, and a desperate hope that they could pull this off. Finally, Jenna spoke. What happens if this works? After I get custody. You move out, Daniel said firmly. We establish you somewhere stable. We tell people we grew apart. Quiet divorce. You keep Miles. I keep Sophia. Everyone's better than they were before. And if it doesn't work? Daniel met her eyes. Then we fight harder. At 11:45, the doorbell rang. Rebecca Lawson from Family Services stood on the porch with a clipboard and a severe expression that suggested she'd seen every kind of fraud imaginable. Mr. Rivera, she said coolly. Ms. Parker, may I come in? Daniel reached for Jenna's hand. She nearly flinched. They hadn't practiced this, but forced herself to accept the touch. His palm was warm, calloused from work, and strangely steady. "Of course," Daniel said with a smile that almost looked genuine. "We've been expecting you." They ushered Rebecca inside, where Sophia and Miles were playing quietly, looking exactly like siblings who'd grown up together. Rebecca's sharp eyes swept the house, cataloguing everything, and the performance began. "Mrs. Rivera," Rebecca said, addressing Jenna, "perhaps you could show me around your home." Mrs. Rivera. The name felt like a brand. But Jenna smiled, squeezed Daniel's hand, and said, "I'd love to." The next hour would determine everything. The inspection had gone better than expected. Rebecca Lawson had walked through the house with clinical precision, noting the children's rooms, the family photos, which notably didn't include Jenna, but Daniel had explained they were still updating. The well-stocked kitchen, the stability evident in every corner. She'd interviewed Sophia, who'd told her enthusiastically about her new friend Miles. She'd watched the children play together, observed how naturally Jenna mothered both kids, how Daniel moved through the house with casual ownership. "Everything appears to be in order," Rebecca had finally said. "Pending verification of your marriage certificate and employment records, I'm prepared to recommend that Miles remain with his mother under your joint custody, Mr. Rivera." Jenna had nearly collapsed with relief. They had 1 week to provide documentation before the final hearing. 1 week to make the lie ironclad. That night, after the kids were in bed, Jenna and Daniel had been celebrated quietly with takeout Chinese food and the knowledge that they'd cleared the first hurdle. "Thank you," Jenna had whispered, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Daniel had replied. "We still have to convince a judge." But they'd done it. They'd fooled family services. What they hadn't counted on was Trevor. Trevor Morgan sat in his Santa Monica loft, scrolling through his ex-wife's social media for the 3rd time that day. Jenna barely posted. A few pictures of Miles at the park, a sunset, nothing interesting. But there was something off about her recent activity. She'd stopped checking in at the diner, stopped posting her usual location tags. She'd gone dark, and that made Trevor suspicious. He'd filed the custody petition as a power move, something to scare her, to remind her that he could take Miles anytime he wanted. He didn't actually want full custody. Kids were expensive and inconvenient, but he wanted control. He wanted Jenna to remember that he was still the man, one with power in this dynamic. The emergency motion had been his lawyer's idea. "Hit her when she's weak," Brad had said. "She'll cave immediately." But Jenna hadn't caved. Somehow, impossibly, she'd produced a husband and a stable home within 12 hours. Trevor smelled a rat. He called Brad. "I need you to investigate something." "Trevor, the case is basically closed. Family Services is recommending the kids stay with your ex." "That's the problem," Trevor said. "There's no way Jenna got married. She's broke, desperate, working double shifts. Nobody marries that. Maybe she's been seeing someone and you didn't know. For how long? A year? I would have heard about it. Miles would have mentioned it when I saw him at Christmas. What do you want me to do?" "Dig," Trevor said. "Find out who this Daniel Rivera is. Find out when they really got married. Find proof it's fake. And if it's legitimate." "It's not," Trevor said coldly. "Trust me. Jenna's desperate enough to lie. We just need to prove it." The call came 3 days later while Jenna was working her shift at the diner. "Ms. Parker, it's Brad Stevens, Mr. Morgan's attorney. I need to ask you a few questions about your recent marriage." Jenna's blood turned cold. She stepped outside into the parking lot, her hand shaking. "What do you want?" "Public records show you and Daniel Rivera were married on August 15th at Los Angeles City Hall. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Interesting, because I've obtained photos from the courthouse that day, and neither of you appear in any of them. I've also spoken to the clerk who worked that day, and she has no record of your ceremony." Jenna's heart stopped. They'd faked the date. They'd created a story, but hadn't actually filed false paperwork yet. They'd been planning to do it quietly through a lawyer Daniel knew, but they'd told family services they were already married. "I'm sure there's been some administrative error," Jenna said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm sure," Brad said mockingly. "I'm also curious about your husband's financial situation. According to my research, Mr. Rivera's mortgage is in his name only. His credit report shows no major purchases or changes in the last year, no wedding rings, no joint accounts, nothing that suggests he was planning to get married. We kept things separate, for simplicity." "Simplicity. Right." Brad's voice turned sharp. "Let me be very clear, Ms. Parker. If you've committed marriage fraud to influence a custody hearing, that's a felony. You could face jail time. And you will definitely lose your son." "I haven't." "Save it for the judge. We're filing a motion to dismiss Family Services' recommendation. We're demanding a full investigation. And when we prove you're lying, Miles will be placed in foster care until I can arrange for Trevor to take full custody." The line went dead. Jenna stood in the parking lot, the neon sign of Rosie's Diner flickering above her, and felt her world collapse. For the second time in a week, they knew, or they suspected enough to destroy everything. She called Daniel immediately. "We have a problem." That night they sat in Daniel's living room after the kids were asleep, the weight of impending disaster pressing down on them. "They can't prove it's fake," Daniel said, but he didn't sound convinced. "They can prove we don't have documentation," Jenna countered. "They can prove the timeline doesn't add up, and if they push hard enough they'll find inconsistencies. We've only known each other a week, Daniel. We can't fake a year of relationship history." "So what do we do?" Jenna looked at him, this stranger who'd become her lifeline. Maybe I should just give up. Take the deal. Let Miles go into temporary foster care until I can prove—" "No." Daniel's voice was firm. "You're not giving up." "But I'm ruining your life. Trevor's lawyer is going to investigate you now. They'll dig into everything. Your job, your daughter, your—" "I don't care," Daniel interrupted. "We made a decision. We told a lie to protect a child. And I'm not going to let some entitled ex-husband destroy you because he wants to feel powerful. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." Daniel met her eyes. "Because I chose to make it my fight. And I don't abandon people. Not anymore." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Jenna felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I don't know what to do." "We fight," Daniel said simply. "We get married for real. We file the paperwork. We make the lie true." Jenna stared at him. "You can't be serious." "Why not? If we're legally married, they can't prove fraud. We'll have documentation. We'll have time. And when this is over, we'll get divorced like we planned. But in the meantime—" He reached across the table and took her hand. "In the meantime, we become the family we're pretending to be." It was insane. It was the only option they had. "Okay," Jenna whispered. "Let's do it." They got married on a Tuesday afternoon at Los Angeles City Hall. No fanfare, no flowers, no guests except Sophia and Miles, who thought they were going on a special adventure downtown. Jenna wore the nicest dress she owned, a simple navy blue thing from Target. Daniel wore slacks and a button-down shirt he usually reserved for work presentations. The ceremony took 11 minutes. A bored clerk read the standard vows while pigeons cooed outside the window. Sophia held a plastic bouquet she'd insisted on bringing. Miles clutched Jenna's hand and asked 3 times if they could get ice cream afterward. When the clerk said, "You may kiss the bride," Daniel and Jenna exchanged an awkward glance. They'd discussed this. They'd agreed to keep physical affection minimal and performative. But standing there, with their children watching, with the weight of everything they were fighting for pressing down on them, Daniel leaned forward and kissed her. It was brief, chaste, the kind of kiss you'd give at a wedding where everyone was watching. But it felt like a promise. "Congratulations," the clerk said flatly, handing them their marriage certificate. Next. Outside, in the plaza where tourists took selfies and homeless veterans asked for change, Jenna stared at the paper in her hands. Marriage certificate, Jenna Marie Parker and Daniel Miguel Rivera. "It's real now," she whispered. "Yeah." Daniel watched Sophia spin around in her dress, laughing. "It's real." They took the kids for ice cream at Grand Central Market, a sprawling food hall in downtown LA where the smell of tacos and Thai food mixed with coffee and fresh bread. Miles got chocolate. Sophia got strawberry. The adults barely touched their cones. "Are you and Daddy married for real now?" Sophia asked Jenna, her face serious. Jenna's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." "Does that mean you're my mom?" The question hit like a punch. Jenna glanced at Daniel, who looked equally stricken. "I'm not your mama, Jenna," said gently. "Nobody can replace your mama. But I'm here, and I care about you. Is that okay?" Sophia thought about this carefully. Then she nodded and went back to her ice cream. Miles tugged Jenna's sleeve. "Does that mean Daniel is my daddy?" Another impossible question. "Daniel is my husband," Jenna said carefully, "which means he's part of our family now. But your daddy is still your daddy, even if he doesn't live with us." "I like Daniel better," Miles said matter-of-factly. "He doesn't yell." The comment was a knife to Jenna's heart. Trevor had never been physically abusive, but his anger, his disappointment, his constant criticism, Miles had absorbed all of it. Daniel knelt down to Miles's level. "Your mama is the best mama in the world," he said seriously. "And she's been taking care of you all by herself for a long time. That takes a lot of courage. You should be proud of her." Miles looked at his mother with wide eyes, as if seeing her differently. "I am proud," he said, quietly. Jenna started crying right there in Grand Central Market. That night, after the kids were asleep, Daniel and Jenna sat on the back patio again. It had become their space, where they dropped the performance and spoke honestly. "Brad called me today," Daniel said. "Trevor's lawyer." Jenna's stomach dropped. "What did he want?" "To intimidate me. He said he's going to prove we're committing fraud. He said he's going to report me to my employer, imply I'm unstable, maybe even suggest I'm an unfit parent to Sophia." "Oh, God." Jenna buried her face in her hands. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. I've destroyed your life." "No," Daniel said firmly. "Trevor is trying to destroy your life, and I'm not going to let him." "But why?" Jenna looked up, tears streaming. "Why are you doing this? Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "Because 3 years ago, when Isabella died, I was drowning. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. I had a 4-year-old who needed me, and I could barely get out of bed. And you know what happened? Nobody helped. Our families were in Mexico. Our friends disappeared because they didn't know what to say. The church we went to sent casseroles for a week and then forgot about us." He paused, his jaw tight. "I almost lost Sophia because I couldn't hold it together. Family services came because her preschool teacher reported that I was dropping her off late. picking her up late, that she was wearing the same clothes multiple days in a row. They investigated me, questioned me, made me feel like I was failing my daughter at the worst moment of our lives. Daniel. I passed, he continued. Barely. But I'll never forget what it felt like to be judged like that. To have strangers evaluate whether you love your child enough, whether you're worthy of being a parent. He looked at Jenna, his eyes fierce. So when I heard you begging for help in that diner, I saw myself. I saw what I would have given anything for. Someone willing to show up. Jenna was crying openly now. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do, Daniel said. You're a good mother. You're working 3 jobs to keep your son fed. You're fighting a system designed to punish poverty. You deserve someone in your corner. They sat in silence, the weight of shared trauma binding them. I'm scared, Jenna admitted. What if we lose anyway? What if the judge sees through us? Then we lose, Daniel said. But we lose fighting. Together. He reached across the table and took her hand. Not for performance. Not for the sake of the lie. But because they'd become something real. 2 broken people building something whole. Together, Jenna whispered. And for the first time since this began, she believed they might actually win. The courtroom in the Stanley Mosque Courthouse in downtown LA was smaller than Jenna had imagined. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, hard wooden benches that made her back ache. This was where her life would be decided, in a room that looked like a DMV. Trevor sat with his lawyer on the left side, looking infuriatingly confident in an expensive suit. He'd gotten a haircut, removed his earrings, transformed himself into the picture of responsible fatherhood. Jenna sat with Daniel on the right, their hands clasped tightly. She wore a dress Daniel's sister had sent from Mexico. Simple, modest, respectable. Daniel wore his work suit, the one he wore to present designs to the city council. The kids were with Daniel's neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd agreed to keep them for the day. Judge Morrison entered, a black woman in her 60s with kind eyes but a stern expression. She'd been a family court judge for 20 years and had seen every variety of dysfunction imaginable. This is a custody review hearing, she began. Mr. Morgan has petitioned for full custody of the minor child, Miles Parker, citing concerns about the mother's stability. Ms. Parker, now Mrs. Rivera, has contested this petition. We're here to determine what's in the best interest of the child. Brad Stevens stood, all polished confidence. Your Honor, Mr. Morgan is concerned about his son's welfare. Ms. Rivera, he said the name with obvious disdain, has a documented history of housing instability, employment instability, and financial struggle. While she's recently acquired a husband and a home, my client believes this arrangement is fraudulent and designed solely to circumvent this court's legitimate concerns. That's a serious accusation, Judge Morrison said. Do you have evidence? Brad smiled. Mr. Rivera and Ms. Rivera were allegedly married 13 months ago. However, there are no photographs of the wedding, no witnesses, no social media posts. None of Mr. Rivera's co-workers knew he was dating anyone. Ms. Rivera never mentioned a boyfriend to her employer. Their marriage certificate was filed only recently and— Objection, Daniel's lawyer, Maria Santos, interrupted. My clients are private people. Not everyone broadcasts their relationship on social media. Private? Brad scoffed. Or covering up a desperate arrangement? Judge Morrison held up her hand. Mr. Stevens, unless you have concrete proof of fraud, these are speculations. What else do you have? Brad called his first witness, Gloria from the diner. Jenna's heart sank. Gloria was a morning shift manager who'd worked at Rosie's for 15 years. Did Ms. Parker ever mention a boyfriend named Daniel? Brad asked. No, Gloria said slowly. She never mentioned dating anyone. Said she didn't have time. Did she ever mention getting married? No. First I heard of it was when she called to say she needed different hours because of family stuff. Family stuff, Brad repeated. Because she'd suddenly acquired a ready-made family. How convenient. Maria Santos stood. Ms. Gloria, did Jenna ever share personal information with you? Talk about her private life? Well, no. She kept to herself mostly. So, it's possible she was dating someone without mentioning it to her co-workers? I suppose. And you have no evidence that her marriage is fraudulent? No, ma'am. Brad called Trevor next. He painted himself as a concerned father, claimed he'd been trying to be more involved, sending money when he could, worried about his son being raised in unstable conditions. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Mr. Morgan, Maria said during cross-examination, how many times have you seen Miles in the past year? Trevor shifted. A few times. How many is a few? 3? 5? Maybe 3. And how much child support have you paid in the past 6 months? Trevor's jaw tightened. I've been between projects. Yes or no, Mr. Morgan? Have you paid child support? No. So you haven't seen your son regularly, haven't supported him financially, but you want full custody? I want what's best for Miles. Interesting definition of best, Maria said dryly. Judge Morrison looked unimpressed. Then Brad pulled his trump card. Your Honor, I'd like to call Mr. Daniel Rivera to the stand. Daniel squeezed Jenna's hand once, then stood. He looked calm, but Jenna could see the tension in his shoulders. Brad circled him like a shark. Mr. Rivera, you're a civil engineer. Stable job. Nice home. Why would you marry a woman you barely knew? I knew her well enough, Daniel said evenly. Really? How long were you dating before you proposed? About 8 months. And where did you propose? Daniel didn't hesitate. At the Getty Center, during sunset. It's Jenna's favorite place. Jenna's breath caught. She'd mentioned the Getty Center once in passing weeks ago. He'd remembered. Brad frowned. How did you meet? At the farmer's market in Old Town Pasadena. She was there with Miles. I was there with Sophia. The kids played together. We started talking. Convenient. And when did you realize you wanted to marry her? Daniel looked directly at Jenna. When I watched her make breakfast for Sophia without being asked. When I saw how much she cared about a child who wasn't even hers. When I realized that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we don't expect. The courtroom was silent. Brad tried to regain control. Mr. Rivera, isn't it true that you married Ms. Parker specifically to help her win this custody case? No, Daniel said firmly. I married Jenna because she's an incredible mother, a hard-working woman, and someone who makes our family better. The timing might look suspicious, but the feelings are real. Feelings, Brad mocked. Your Honor, this is clearly... A door opened at the back of the courtroom. Mrs. Rodriguez entered, holding Sophia and Miles by the hands. Both children looked confused. I'm sorry, Your Honor, Mrs. Rodriguez said, frantically. They overheard me talking to my husband about the trial and insisted on coming. I couldn't stop them. Judge Morrison sighed. Bring them forward. Sophia walked straight to Daniel. Miles went to Jenna. Both children looked terrified. Young lady, Judge Morrison said gently to Sophia, why are you here? Because Miles is scared, Sophia said in a small voice. He thinks the judge is going to take him away from his mama. Is that true, Miles? Miles nodded, tears streaming down his face. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Can you tell me about your home, Miles? About where you live? Miles looked at Jenna, who nodded encouragingly. I live with Mama and Daniel and Sophia, Miles said quietly. We have bunk beds. Daniel reads us stories. Mama makes pancakes. Sophia shares her toys. Do you feel safe there? Yes. Do you want to stay there? Yes. Miles's voice broke. Please don't take me away. Please, I'll be good. I promise. Judge Morrison's expression softened. Sophia spoke up. Your Honor, when my real mama died, I was really sad. But Jenna is nice to me. She braids my hair. She doesn't try to replace my mama, but she makes me feel safe. And Miles is my best friend. Please don't take him. The courtroom was utterly silent. Trevor looked uncomfortable. Brad looked furious. But Judge Morrison looked like she'd just seen the truth. Thank you, children, she said gently. You can sit with your parents now. Both kids scrambled into Daniel and Jenna's laps, holding tight. Judge Morrison looked at Trevor. Mr. Morgan, do you have anything to add? For the first time, Trevor looked uncertain. He glanced at Miles, who wouldn't meet his eyes. No, Your Honor. Then I'm ready to make my ruling. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and looked at everyone in the courtroom. I've been doing this job for a long time, she began. I've seen every kind of family configuration imaginable. Biological, adoptive, foster, blended. And I've learned that family isn't defined by blood or paperwork. It's defined by care, commitment, and showing up. She looked at Trevor. Mr. Morgan, you haven't paid child support in 8 months. You've seen your son 3 times in a year. You work in Santa Monica, 40 minutes from where he lives, and you couldn't find time to visit. While I don't doubt you love your son in your own way, love without action is just sentiment, and children need more than sentiment. Trevor's face reddened. Judge Morrison turned to Jenna and Daniel. Mrs. Rivera, your history shows financial struggle, yes. Housing instability, yes. But it also shows a mother who works 3 jobs to keep her child fed, who shows up, who fights. She paused. As for your marriage, Mr. Stevens has insinuated fraud, but he's provided no evidence. What I see is 2 people who've built a stable home for their children. Whether that home was built quickly or slowly is irrelevant. What matters is that it exists. She looked at Sophia and Miles, still clutching their parents. These children feel safe, they feel loved, they've bonded. And while I'd normally be concerned about the speed of this arrangement, the alternative is placing Miles in foster care while his mother tries to establish stability on her own. That serves no one. Judge Morrison put her glasses back on and looked at her notes. Therefore, I'm ruling in favor of the mother. Full custody remains with Jenna Rivera. Mr. Morgan, you're granted supervised visitation twice monthly, contingent on you completing a parenting class and establishing a regular child support payment schedule. If you miss 3 consecutive payments or 3 consecutive visitations, your parental rights will be re-evaluated. Trevor stood. Your Honor, this is final, Judge Morrison interrupted, unless you'd like to appeal, in which case the appellate court will review my decision and likely reach the same conclusion. Trevor sat down, defeated. Mrs. Rivera, Mr. Rivera, Judge Morrison continued. I'm going to say something off the record. Whether your marriage began as a strategy or a genuine relationship, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you're showing up for these children. Keep doing that. That's all any parent can do. She banged her gavel. Custody remains with the mother. Case closed. Jenna collapsed into Daniel's arms, sobbing. Miles and Sophia cheered, not fully understanding but sensing the victory. Maria Santos grinned. Even stoic Mrs. Rodriguez was crying. Trevor stood and walked out without looking at his son. Brad Stevens gathered his papers with a scowl. "This isn't over," he muttered as he passed. But it was over. Miles was safe. The family, real or invented, had won. Outside the courthouse, in the plaza where street performers entertained tourists and food trucks lined the curbs, Jenna held Miles so tightly she worried she might hurt him. "We did it, baby," she whispered. "You're staying with Mama. You're safe." "I knew you wouldn't let them take me," Miles said with complete faith. Sophia tugged Daniel's hand. "Daddy, does this mean Miles is my brother forever?" Daniel looked at Jenna over the children's heads. Forever was a complicated word for two people who'd agreed to a temporary arrangement. But watching Sophia and Miles holding hands, watching Jenna's relief and joy, Daniel realized something had shifted. The lie had become real. The performance had become truth. The fake family had become the only family that mattered. "Yeah, Mija," he said softly. "Miles is your brother." Jenna met his eyes, and in that moment, she saw what he did. That they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. That whatever happened next, they were bound together now. Not by paperwork, not by necessity, but by choice. 3 months passed. Autumn turned to winter. Brooklyn dressed itself in holiday lights and cold wind. Amara's life found rhythm, school, homework, time with Mama, the kind of ordinary that felt extraordinary when you remembered what you'd survived. Then, in December, Mama got a letter. It came from a non-profit called the Foundation for Children's Futures. Inside was a scholarship notification for Amara. Full tuition to Brooklyn Academy, one of the best private schools in the borough. Room for advancement into their high school program. Opportunities Mama had only dreamed about. "I didn't apply," Amara said, reading over her shoulder. "Neither did I." Mama's hands shook. This is thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands. Why would they?" She stopped, looked at the paperwork again. No donor listed, just anonymous benefactor. Amara knew, felt it in her bones. This was him, still protecting, still remembering, still making sure that the girl who'd offered him $1 got everything he could give in return. She started at Brooklyn Academy in January. The education was rigorous, challenging, better than anything she'd experienced. But more than that, she felt safe. Security was tight, background checks on every adult, protocols for protecting students, an environment where monsters couldn't reach. When she was 12, she got sick, really sick. Pneumonia that turned serious, put her in Methodist hospital for a week. Mama's insurance covered most of it, but not all. The remaining balance was $8,000. Impossible. Then it disappeared. "System error," the billing department said. "Your account shows paid in full." Mama argued, insisted on knowing who'd paid it. But the hospital couldn't, or wouldn't, say. The payment came through an anonymous charitable organization that handled medical debt for families in need. Amara knew. When she was 14, Mama's car died. Transmission gave out. Repair cost more than the car was worth. Mama started talking about taking the bus, about longer commutes, about sacrifices. A week later, a used Honda appeared in their building's parking spot, keys in an envelope with Mama's name, title signed over, registration current, and a note. for your service to others." Mama cried. Amara held her, and neither of them said what they both understood, that somewhere in Brooklyn, a man who the world feared was watching over them in ways that defied explanation. It continued. When Amara needed a laptop for school, one appeared, not new, but functional, exactly what she needed. When Mama's hours got cut at the hospital, an anonymous donation came through that covered 3 months of rent. When Amara wanted to take SAT prep classes but they couldn't afford it, a scholarship magically materialized. Never extravagant, never showy, just what they needed, when they needed it, from someone who understood the difference between help and charity. Protection came in other forms, too. When a boy at school started bothering Amara, nothing like Jerome, just typical teenage boundary pushing, he suddenly transferred schools mid-year. When a landlord tried to raise their rent illegally, a lawyer appeared offering free services, and the landlord backed down immediately. The message was clear. Amara Collins was under protection, invisible, untouchable, guarded by forces most people couldn't see. She never called the number on the card Min Jun had given her, never needed to, but she kept it, tucked in her wallet behind her school ID, a promise, a reminder, a lifeline if the world ever became too much again.